Politics with me, the political poet, Jamia Zarzuela. And in today's episode, I'll be bringing out my mentor and professor to explore how what we believe, either individually or collectively, influences social norms, culture, and policies, especially ones that we've been dealing with today. Dr. Kamara Taylor is an award-winning professor holding a Bachelor's and Master's degree in political science, a Master's in clinical psychology, and a PhD in neuropsychology with a specialized emphasis in cognition and instruction. Her unique teaching style creates teachable moments in the mundane and allows the classroom to be wherever she is. This Illinois native strives to break the stigma of mental illness with her books Out of My Mind, The Uncurable, and The Myth of Crazy, as well as with projects that incorporate mental health and music. She also does this in the classroom as well as in the various conferences and workshops that she holds. Kamara's passion is to infect, influence, and insulate by working with institutions nationally to bring forth change. So without further ado, here is episode 3, I Am the Culture. This episode is sponsored by Coconut Casual, a Black-owned lifestyle brand focused on positively impacting our globe by promoting female empowerment. It's all love at Coconut Casual. And remember, if it's for us and by us, then support us. With COVID putting a damper on connecting and networking, I had to find a new way to business card. That's why I went with Link. My link card allows me to share my podcasts, social media, websites, or whatever else about me while still keeping it safe and social distancing. The card's NFC capability allows me to share all of that in just a tap of the phone. And the QR code on the back lands people to a custom page that I've modified for Black Lives Matter or COVID updates. In fact, you can listen to this very episode up on there now. So say goodbye to handing out your old business cards and say hello to Link. And because you're a part of the Speak Free fam, enjoy a 15% off discount by using poetry&prose at checkout. That's visiting linkapp.com and typing in poetry&prose. That's linkapp.com and typing in poetryprose when you get like me and grab yourself a new way to business card. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you, especially because I feel like you're like the perfect fit to talk about the culture and how an affirmation, like how an I am statement, how me saying something and how what we think will come into fruition and be our reality. So
right.
At least how you when you're teaching a class, your lecture just flows and like with culture and current events and what's popping now to structure, to whatever lesson it is that we're supposed to be learning. And I feel like, dang, how do you do that? I always feel like, dang, how is she able to just like make it like just flow off the tongue like that? The only other person I know that can really flow is Dr. Shepherd. And it's crazy because I know that she's like in flow space because someone will ask a very interesting question that would at least throw us off the loop, and somehow she segues back into the lecture with the question that was used. She's using everything outside of her as a tool, and I just think that that's so cool. That's something that I admire about you and taking your class.
Oh, thank you so much. I think maybe it's a Midwestern thing. I know. I don't know. I know Dr. Shepherd is from Detroit, originally, and I'm from Chicago originally, you know, and just, I mean, the freestyle of just being in, and I like the word that you use, being in flow, right? When you think about meditation, right, and we think about flow, that's like our mind is so busy that we're just zoned in to that one thing, right? And I think that's what creativity is. You know, I think that's what drives us as a people, especially BIPOC people. I'm not saying that people that are not of color doesn't have the same thing, but our creativity comes in our flow, right? Our creativity comes from just like influence. So I don't even really Jamia, to be honest with you, I don't even use the word culture because I think it's such a propaganda type of word right now, right? I'm doing this for the culture. Like this is for the culture, right? You know, this is culturally driven, right? You know, I think the ownership of the word, that when you are very cultured, you don't even have to announce it, right? It's like I don't walk in the room and I'm like, hey, I'm Black, right? You know, it is apparent that people perceive what culture is extremely different, right? You know, it could be music, it can be clothing, it can be hairstyles. You know, I remember when my hair is really naturally curly, and I remember when I was gonna first lock my hair, right? And people were like talking to me out of it, like that's gonna put you in a box. Culturally, that puts you in a space where you're gonna get less job opportunities. I mean, it was a big conversation around hair and what that means to, as far as your culture, what that means as far as what you represent. And you know, the representation of what locks are, you know, just like the ideology of what people perceive it on the outside to be and the internalization of what it means is two different things, right? People on the outside, you're a Rastafari, like, you know, you smoke a lot of weed, right?
Actually, when I had locks, that was my big problem.
But yeah. Or you're a thug, like in Chicago, you are put in this box like you are a gangster, like you hood, like, you know. So but what about the pride that comes along with it, right? What about getting back to our roots? That's not, and let me be very clear, that is not, any of those are none of the reasons why I choose to lock my hair. I choose to lock my hair because my mother woke up and she had lost all of her hair to cancer, right? From the chemo. And so I went to go cut my hair off. And this brother was like, yo, you have beautiful hair. I won't cut it off. What I'm going to do is lock it. Okay. So like even my journey in it was different. Right. So when we look at, you know, culture, you know, and I respect that because half the time I'm in flow when I'm teaching. Right. I'm trying to see what comes from my heart is going to reach the heart. And then I intertwine that with pedagogy to make sense of the content. Right. But I'm so much in flow. My creative self is in flow. What I'm trying to do is give a gift. Right. And that gift of educational creativity and learning. So I definitely that you know, when you compare me to a Dr. Shepherd, who I have mad respect for as a colleague and a mentor, that's honorable to me, right? You know, because there's not a lot of women of color that I can look up to in higher ed that are giants, right? Yeah, I appreciate that. But yeah, that culture thing is so new. The nuance of it is new, not the word, right? Like culturally driven. Like if you think about it, what people assume for Black people with culture was watermelon and fried chicken.
Yeah.
Or chitlins, you know, that was the culture. You know, that was the culture, right? So I mean, you know, it's a very interesting word now and how it's being utilized and who is using it and in what context are they using it? So I definitely, I appreciate you bringing this conversation with poetry, prose, and politics to the table, because it's a very, very permanent a conversation to be had. Yeah.
Yeah, when I that's a lot to unpack. I remember when my mom was the first person in my family, my entire family, to lock her hair up. She went to a really big loctician that did a tour to Miami so that she could go lock people's hair there. And this was in probably 2000 or 2001, somewhere around there. So that's how long she's had her hair locked since, gosh, I assume before I could even run.
Wow.
And so she, not to tell my age, I'm a millennial, but I'm still a Gen Zer, if
Right,
that makes any sense. But she was the first person to lock my hair, her hair, and my family. And with that, a lot of my family members were nervous that of the same thing. Is she going to be able to maintain her good job that she has? As she had a great job back then, and an even better job now. But for somebody that didn't have a high school diploma, in the middle of working to get her GED, she had a great job. She was making a lot of money, and then now she locks her hair. And to me, my mom just ended up looking like the sun. Before, she looked like a D'Angelo music video, or like a character from Love Jones. She was in leather and, black, and that was her aesthetic.
Yeah.
And then I saw the rest of my family get locks, and it just became really normal. And especially being from Florida and seeing those, seeing Haitian people, seeing Jamaican culture, growing up around that so much, and it being very influential in my life. Yeah, it really would annoy me when I would I was in something called Youth in Government over in Los Angeles. And many states have it. But Youth in Government was ran through or sponsored with the Y. We learned about local politics. Then we'd go to our capital to fight for policies and bills, and we learned about that whole creation. We would vote for our representatives for the actual state itself, as well as our representatives for our section. And it was really cool. But there was where I learned that me, a Black girl who had a mom that made a lot of money, didn't make enough money for very expensive LA, was dependent on government assistance, especially because my dad was in prison, and she had 2 other kids. So this single mom was not dependent, but it really helped her to have the government aid. And I at one point, we were homeless, and it was, because it's LA. Good money don't always mean livable wage there. And so I learned through Youth in Government that I don't experience the same America as a lot of my white counterparts, the kids that I went to school with. And I also learned that good and bad, especially with my dad being in jail for like 17 years or so, I learned that good and bad isn't linear. It's not like it's either good or it's bad, and it's black and white. I learned that the world is a lot of gray. The deepest, darkest grays look black, and the purest of creams of grays look white. And just because it doesn't mean it is. And so I was so annoyed with the fact that those kids would ask me if I knew who Waka Flocka was. And I'd be like, no, I listen to System of a Down. Do I was raised every single morning. My mom would play Bob Marley, Sergio Mendes, which is a Portuguese musician,
Okay.
and I would wake up to the smell of like lavender bleach. It was time to
Mm,
clean.
right.
That was
Yeah.
my good feeling. And so I would lie and say I didn't know who Bob Marley was. No, I don't know to these kids because it was so annoying.
Yeah.
Because I felt like I had to stand and be a representative of a black person with locks. And so when I think
Mm,
about an affirmation, I, Jamia, am. Who am I? She, Jamia, is. Who is she? You, Jamia, are. I that she, Jamia, is. When I knew who I was back then and now, especially when I was still growing into myself, but how I was going to perceive she, Jamia, is a what? She's a drug dealer's daughter. She
right.
is a daughter of a mother that has a ninth grade education. And
Right.
so
Right.
they already came to me with these ideas of me. And I really wanted to just confuse the heck out of them because I was just like, no, yeah, you don't need to know that I'm a drug dealer's daughter, but even still, a drug dealer's daughter is just as smart as you are. I'm in all AP classes, and I really wanted to shake up, how people saw me, kind of like Kanye, who I imagine is one of your favorite rappers.
Yes, yes, and that's the reason why I think that when you think about how people perceive us, right, and how they perceive us as Black, right, and what
Mhm.
Black looks like to others, what Black sounds like, what Black feels like, I was at this taking Black Pride event over like last week, right, in the city of Seattle. And um this young lady that gets up and she's like a YouTube star, right? And like this kid, they like, oh, this is the first like out something 18-year-old kid. And this girl is like a white girl, right? A little young white girl, and she's like um, you know, mimicking, appropriation of maybe Nicki Minaj mixed with Megan Thee Stallion, right? Um, the linguistics, right? And I'm looking, right? And not that I don't think that like, um, you know, I was so shocked that culturally, right, this is what she sees as Black music. This is what she sees as mimicking Black culture, right?
Yeah.
And when we see someone like Kanye West, who for most is like, oh man, bro's off his rockers, right? But when he says things early on that mimics pop, right? He's shunned like from the industry, right?
Yeah.
He put in his box, but then he aligns himself with a um Trump, then he's shunned again and put in his box, right? And he does things to challenge the social norm, right? He never said that he was a Republican. He said, why isn't it that Black people have to choose to be Democrat because of where you live?
That is something
Right?
that that is something that I never saw him as crazy for, and I would always argue with my friends about. But that's because the man that raised me, not my biological dad, but um, shout out to the man that raised me and loved on me so much and helped me grow and nurture into being somebody so into politics.
Mm-hmm.
I went to him one day and I said, oh, so dad, are you gonna vote for Obama? Back when I was a little girl. And he said, why? Why am I going to vote for Obama? And I'm like, well, because it's history. He's making history. He's going to be the first Black president. If he's like, Jamia, baby, I'm going to vote for him because he's Black. And I said, yeah, that's great, right? He's going to be the first. He was like, no, what is he doing for us?
Yes.
Why am I going to vote for him just because he's Black? I'm like, well, Dad, don't we want to win? He's like, okay, but just how many Black people do you know harm? Okay, how many white people do you know love? Okay, so baby, we gonna vote for whoever is loving up on us and not going to harm us, or at least is going to harm us the least.
Yes,
and so
I feel that.
That's how when people say, my husband, my husband comes from another country. He's Dominican, meaning that they have democracy. There was corruption, still is kind of. They're trying to fix it now with this new president that they got. But I won't digress.
Yes. Yeah, but we can add that in when we're talking about culture though. But go right ahead.
but he is a conservative. And for all, like, with the definition of what a true conservative is supposed to be, or what a true Republican is supposed to be, he would align himself with that. And he says that there is no such thing as Republican and Democrat. It's just crazy people that is projected with our media, that is presented with outbursts. It's just like, it looks like just crazy people and pacifiers. And so, it's really interesting to see a person from a developing country, specifically their perspective on our government. Because it really opens your eyes. But I don't think my family was ever really as democratic as we would think that they would be. I think that they're not Republican and don't align themselves to be conservative because they're not wanted there. I'm talking about they're Christian, they're Baptist Christian at that, because the Pentecostal church had transitioned over to baptism instead. And so it's long dresses and it's modesty and it's all of these things, all of these beliefs that I grew up with that would otherwise align me with, and they built themselves up to be sustainable and not want to depend so much on the government unless it's needed. But because candidates on the Republican end will always hurt them, especially in the South, then they are voting Democrat. Me, I don't think that any of my family are really party aligned. I don't think that they will actually say I'm a Democrat. I think they will word it, I vote Democrat because, and that's what I have come to learn at my age, is that both of these, I don't even think Joe Biden is Democratic. I think Joe Biden is not even moderate. I think that he's Republican. But because but I'm talking about Republican, like what by definition Republican is supposed to be. Wanting small, quote unquote, small government, wanting, even though, with Roe versus Wade, the reason why even states, were fighting for more power was actually so that they could have control over the South and how they dealt with slavery and how they dealt with newly freed, enslaved Black people. So, which is meaning that the whole idea of state power and all of that stuff just comes from, systematic racism. But that's another conversation. But how do you navigate as a person with your peers and family members that you have to explain, like, look, this show isn't what you think it is. It's a whole bunch of grays, light grays and dark grays. And especially this new gray is really grayish. How do you navigate through that? Because I don't even know how to explain to my sister that the reason why you were voting for a lesser evil, because my sister doesn't want to vote.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? You're right. Like, I think that the obligation has been put on people of color is to align themselves with a Democratic candidate, right? So I grew up in Chicago, which is a every place outside of Chicago is more conservative, but Chicago is a Democratic machine. So I can recall earlier voting when I turned 18 and going to the polls and only having the option of voting for Democrat candidates in my community, right? Unless it was a presidential race, then you get to choose the president, right? So you're kind of forced into, and we're talking about, that's right there. If we're going to define culture, that's creating a culture of aligning ourselves to be limited in our thought process, right? I had this individual that was interested in me, like in a dating scene, right? And they were like, "Oh my God, you're such an amazing human. You have such a great heart. Like, you're kind, you're loving, you're sweet, you're romantic." But they turned around and told me like, "But you could never be my person because you're too conservative." Right?
That's
and
interesting.
I as highly educated and the much respect that I have for this person, I was like, that's great because everyone can decide who they choose to be, aligned with them. But it also saddened me that that people clearly don't understand humanity and politics and polity, right? And how the great divide of who we are as a people has already been created with us, aligning us when people of color was only Republicans back in the day.
And now shifted, and now
it's
shifted,
right? And how people of color, especially Blacks and Latins, are highly conservative in their view, their religious view, their view of sexuality, their view, so it's, to me, when we talk about political culture, right? And you have a Kanye West that aligns himself one way and people like shuns him, or he says things about like slavery was a choice. Right? To shake people up, right? To start a conversation about, could we have gotten out, right? So I don't know, because when I look at like creating this infrastructure, what culture is for me as a woman of color in this country, I have to cultivate myself in a multitude of who I am, clearly defining myself daily, not based off of my inner me, but based off of trying to not fit in a box of what society sees me as a Black woman, So I get what you're saying. And when I had conversations with people about not particularly voting for any candidate based off of race, but based off of like, what they are doing, how they pouring in, then I'm kind of shunned, right? I'm like, so, I mean, I love this conversation about, just understanding ourselves within the term culture, right? Which then kind of expands on what does culture look like for me? How do I internalize that? How do I go throughout my day navigating myself as a poor Black kid, that's not seen as biracial, that's seen as Black, Like, you know what I'm saying? How do I cultivate myself in a society when I walk down the street, they don't see me as a doctor, right? They see me as a threat. You know, how do you, but then embrace the idea of my Black culture in music, in clothes, in food, in arts, you know? It's a very, you know, interesting dynamic. I think Washington State on the surface is very inclusive on the surface, but it's not. It's very exclusive. You know, it excludes a lot of people out if you're not a Washingtonian, you know, if you don't align yourself with a very I'm gonna say liberal mindset, but allegiant thinking of being liberal, you know, because that's a part of the culture. But like, are we living it? Right? You know, when we talk about the culture, are we living it? You know, I like what you said, and what you said about, you know, even with, you know, what's, it's Kanye a genius, right? But he you know, the individual, you know, spelled it like genius, right? You know, and I would say, like, would we question his antics because Beethoven and Mozart also was a little bit off their rockers, right? And we live by their art. So is Shakespeare, you know, and we live by their art. So was Machiavelli, and we live by their art, you know, their contribution. So, I mean, when we talk about culture, you can't talk about hip hop and Black culture without mentioning a Tupac Shakur or a Kendrick Lamar now, or Kanye West, or a Biggie Smalls, or, I mean, even without you wouldn't have a Megan Thee Stallion if you didn't have a Lil' Kim or Foxy Brown, or, I mean, you know, it's just, you know, I love music, right? I think if in my next life, I'm gonna be Beyonce, right? But like, I love music so much. I love the arts. Whether it's the ballet or the orchestra, or, you know, just like live music, artists that like Lucky Day and Sir, Snow, you know, just Jasmine Sullivan, like people that doesn't really get to take an India REs, you know. But when I think about when people see culture, do they even infuse soul, right? Do they understand the lyrics? You know, do they understand the feeling? You know, do they cry when they listen with the struggle of a relationship in the words, or this, you know, it's so interesting because you can replicate the culture, but if you don't live it, do you understand it? Right? You know, Kanye grew up with a single mother, you know, with no dad around, which he had to like navigate this space of being a man, being a Black man, and thinking different in a city that probably deemed him to be gay because he wasn't hard enough. You know, so like, I wonder if people even understand what culture is, you know, like really intimately. You know, like, I can't wash off my mocha skin, even if I wanted to, right?
Yeah. I really feel like the interesting part about culture is there are people that are shifting how we, the masses, view what culture is. Kendrick, for example, to me is that person that I go to and I say, this is the person that I feel like shifts perspective on how other people that aren't Black and even Black people will view culture. And it's just really interesting, like you were saying, people, when we think about Kanye, we ask, you know, or we'll say like Kanye is cocky, conceited, confident, crazy. he calls himself a genius. He says that I am a god, I am a genius. You're looking at albums like Yeezy, where that's literally the title of the song, and where he laughs it off, how people perceive him with songs like, or with freestyles like I Miss the Old Kanye. But at the end of the day, I look to folks like Kanye, like Jay, like Kendrick, because I feel like they not only just like challenge what they created or what they probably lived in to say, yeah, this is culture, but they're really walking in a space in where they recognize that we almost believed some folks believe a false narrative. When I look at like hip hop, right? We look at gangster rap, and it was even in a case where it was said to incite imminent lawless action. And this is in Davidson versus Time Warner, because it was after a Texas state trooper was murdered by someone listening to Tupacalypse Now. So that federal district court, yes, baby, that federal district court sided with Time Warner and ruled that the album was protected under the First Amendment. So yes, like when we think about when I think about what hip hop is, I only thought of it as a reflection of my reality and what it is that I'm listening to, or what it is that I'm experiencing, but I never really saw it as the end all be all, because I had jazz, I had blues, I had so many other outlets of experiencing, Blackness and Black culture. And then not only Blackness and Black culture, African American wise, when I'm saying Black, but the African diaspora when I say Black. Like I said, listening to Sergio Mendes, that took beats from that's taking music from actual Africa, drums from Africa. When you're listening to merengue and bachata and dembo, and it's a fusion of like African styles, Latin styles, their indigenous instruments, and so on and so forth. You just want to be loud today, huh? Yeah, it's okay. I love you too. But when I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about it reflecting my reality, especially my reality being the drug dealer's daughter, seeing, what my cousins are facing. Oh, you okay? Oh, you okay? Is it through? Okay, good. He gave me pound. Yes. Do you mind if I finish my conversation? Thank you. When I think about music, hip hop specifically being a reflection, and I hear songs like Smoking and Drinking by YG featuring Kendrick, I hear self-medication because they are living a tough reality. They're living in the hood. Somebody just got shot, somebody that they love and that they care about, somebody they're wanted, whatever the case is. And that's a real reality. That's a real experience that I've seen. When I listen to Future, prime example, I hear somebody that is self-medicating because he's feeling like he's not really cared about, and his attention that he gets is fake. And you're talking about, he's always talking about lean and Percocet and lean, Percocet, codeine. stuff that, you know, us Southerners, especially Houston community, would know about. When you're thinking about Pepsi and DJ Screw, and I'm listening to Chop and Screw, I'm hearing, baby, you can't keep doing that. Well, how about give me just a second? No, you can't keep. You can't. Oh. Here. No, here. Because you being on my lap and playing with that's not cool. You see, I'm trying to do something here. Can you go sit down, please? Yes. Sit down. Here. Here's your papa. Okay, well, you're going to have to give that up. Retire one of them. You're going to have to retire one of them, sir. He wants to play with his car on top of the keyboard. So pardon me. I've lost my train of thought. Anyway, when I think about when I think about how hip hop has evolved, I'm thinking about the funkiness of Curtis Mayfield for Pusha Man. I'm your mother. I'm what does he say? I'm your doctor in the alley. When I think of Curtis Mayfield and Pusha Man, I think about the cocaine epidemic. I think about how that evolved from Billy. Oh, good. I think about how that's evolved from Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit, and how lynching in the Jim Crow South.
Yes.
Lynching in the Jim Crow South. I think about how that was even an illegal song to perform back then. How she would get in trouble if she would perform that song, and the reasons why she would get in trouble for performing it. But I also think of how that song was just a manifestation of old Negro spirituals, like Hold On, which literally was it was almost like a tool to hold for anchor throughout the hardest of a enslaved Black person's life in America.
Yes.
So when I think about hip hop, I don't think about it like, oh yeah, he's talking about like the disrespect of women, and he's talking about killing his op and that being my culture. That's not what I view as my culture. I see it as this is the human condition to survive, and that being it. And survival, especially in America, for Black people, has been almost like an identity that we've had to maintain because we were forced to. It's not like we wanted that, but we were with every single policy that was created was forced upon us. And it's just a reflect hip hop to me. Yes, hip hop culture and Black culture it intertwines, but I think what people get wrong is they think that it's surface deep. And while we do have some songs that's just party music and it's just recklessness, it's not surface deep. And it concerns me because, like I said, with affirmations, I know who Jamia is. I, Jamia, am enough. I, Jamia, am a creator. I, Jamia, am that I am. But when somebody already perceives me with however it is I choose to wear my hair, she, Jamia, is, with that affirmation, am I choosing to believe that? And then how do Black kids, Jamal or July, my son, July is he going to take on that identity and then start acting like what people perceive him to be simply because that's what he was told? And that's something that I think that you even talked about in your in your lectures.
Yeah. Well, I think us creating a narrative early on empowers who we see ourselves as, right? You know, like as you said, like with your affirmations, right? But having affirmations and strong affirmations as a foundation and understanding how society is going to see you and talking about that as in our household, you know, unfortunately for the kids that don't have that foundation, that's when the narrative gets twisted. That's when society gets to define if they are a criminal, or are they constructive, or are they disastrous, right? I come from a similar background, a family who were notorious drug dealers, right? I'm not talking about, pack workers on the corner, but notorious drug dealers in Chicago, right? And so oftentimes when people saw me, they like, oh, that's Skiwi cousin. That's Skiwi doing it. That's Ski, like you know what I'm saying? And oh, that's four them, right? You become who society places this label of you, who you are. And sometimes because you're a kid and you're evolving and you changing and you shifting, and we continuously shift and evolve, right? As humans, as adults, we want to fulfill that narrative because we don't know a different story. That's why I think exposure, right? What I wish would happen with people, especially our people that we have in the arts and music and entertainment in general, of people of color, that they sit down and have these conversations of like, this was my experience because this is what I was suffering through. You know what I'm saying? Like you said about when somebody talking about lean all the time, like, are they working with the pharmaceutical company, right? Or that was a human reaction for depression, right? This is how I cope. This is how I cope. And a beautiful thing is that we tell our stories. We tell our stories through our words. This not just I'm mimicking life. This is my lived in experience. This is my qualitative experiences on what happened to me, what I've experienced, what I see around me, what's in my neighborhood, what's happening in my household. Our stories are powerful, and that's why we can relate. Yeah, the beat is nice, right? Yeah, the beat is banging, right? But at the same time, the words are real. When I think about things like a drill music, that's real. When I think about like when I'm relating to whatever sung it, that's real. They telling my story. I think it was Roberta Flack, right? Lauryn Hill remade it. What was it? Not Killing Me Softly. Yeah, maybe it was Killing Me Softly, right? When she was like singing his life, singing my life through his words. You know what I'm saying? That's real, right? When we have that connection, that connectivity, when we walk in the room, Jamia, and somebody give us the head nod, right? And it make us feel welcome.
Yeah, exactly.
It's that same feeling when we hear lyrics, right? That's a welcoming head nod to us. That's us saying, hey, not only is this my story, I know you relate to this, right? And to me, if I had to put a coinage into defining what culture is to me, that's culture. That interrelation of like, I feel you. I don't care if you're a neuropsychologist or if you the waiter at Dick's Burgers. Like, I feel you, I get you, I see you, you're seen. Like, you're heard, your pain is there. I know it because I have the same pain. Maybe I don't cope with it with lean. Maybe I cope with it with exercise, or maybe I cope with it with burying myself in just getting myself more knowledgeable. Maybe like before I got so Kanye fixed, right? The person, like my family, you'll be so surprised. My family called me Tupac. Right. It's funny. It's funny. I don't know why my cousin Ebony, shout out to my cousin Pooh Ebony. Just start like, to them, I'm the Tupac of my family, I guess, I'm assuming, right? And we be on family calls, okay, Pac, like, what? That's an honor. That means that my narrative that I'm telling, like, it's speaking volumes. It's a political stance, but it's an emotional stance. It's a real stance. It's like interconnected family. It's breaking chains. It's like understanding barriers. Like it's breaking down walls, but building up dreams. Like, it's, to me, that's what culture is, when we can see ourselves in each other without even meeting each other, right? Yeah. And you can't tell me that somebody else outside of that real culture can relate to that. My bio father, who is a very white man, right? He, the first time I had a conversation with this brother about what I did, he says, well, you're German, all of them is smart and, and great. And I'm thinking to myself, like, that is some arrogance, and that is so disconnected because, my Black skin didn't get me through the door to actually, even being here in this moment, it has created barriers because people don't see my works, they see my flesh, right? Mm-hmm. They see my melanin. So he would never understand culture. His story is so different, right? His story is like, you German, you got some Hungarian and Germany. You should get it. Like, you should be a boss. You should it's such a disconnect, right? Because they don't understand that, like, just being in a room and being oftentimes being the one that's voices need to be silenced or heard creates an environment where people see you as this specific portion of your culture, right? When we think about people like Marcus Garvey, right? I tell people all the time, I am a combination of Malcolm and Martin, right? And oftentimes I'm way more Malcolm than I ever would be Martin. On paper, I'm Martin, right? In reality, I'm Malcolm, right? And what I mean by that is because they both infuse political culture, mm-hmm. right? They both had a hand in helping us to understand what we should have been aligning ourselves. Now, their policies, their ideologies differ, rightfully so, right? But on a contrast, society separated them because their vision was the same. Their alignment was the same. Because their experiences was the same of how they was being treated as Black men in this country. At a time where we still see Black men and women and men and women of color being treated the same way based off of what people believe our culture should be. Getting back to like Barack real quick, I know we run out of time. Getting back to that aspect of like, why we align ourselves based off of race. I don't do anything based off of race, right? I am a proud woman of color in this country, but I don't align myself with people based off of our race. I align myself with people that's based off of goodness, right? Based off of how I see they navigate in spaces and treat others, right? Because to me, that matters, right? To me, that matters so much more than just the melanin of our skin, right? Yeah, community is great. Community helps to build and create what we think is like what culture is. Like we say things like Black Lives Matter, right? When we say things like, Blue Lives Matter, when we say things like all lives matter. When we say things like, but damn, does my individual life matter to you? Like, I get it in theory, right? In theory, that's culturally appropriate to say. But in theory, when I walk down the street, do you acknowledge me? When I walk down the street, do I acknowledge you? If I see Jamia and I know Jamia is not the scholar that she is, am I treating her with the worth as a human that she should be, she should be treated as, you know? And so I kind of navigate myself in these spaces, and I get in trouble a lot, Jamia. I get in trouble. Listen, I get in trouble because I'm not the average scholar. I'm not the average professor. I'm not the average administrator. I get in trouble because I don't put myself and others in boxes, right? So when I saw what you wanted to speak about today about culture, it kind of threw me for a loop, because I'm like, hell, our culture is defined by what white America says it is now. You know, our music is regulated by what yes, but why CEOs, if white kids are the most populated with buying hip hop than even people of color, and we're making it. You know, so it is clearly we are at a distance of defining what and whom we are culturally, right? Especially being a person of color in this country, right? If I'm a person of color from other countries, I can go back, I can trace my roots. But my roots as a Black American in this country is as white as me thinking about baseball and apple pie, right? And owning a home. You know, so it gets confused, because who do we turn to understand who we are? You know, we are the ancestors of the ancestors of the ancestors, and the generations so far removed of slaves whose identity was lost. So Africans always will denounce me because I am ancestrally from Africa, but I'm not an African, right? And Black, that's just a spectate of color that was given to help define or put some type of label to me, right? So, I mean, when I hear people saying, you know, nigga, right? And, you know, and Black people own that word, right? You know, we what up, right? You know, we put the, you know, right. We coined that word to empower ourselves in it in such a more embracive way, so it won't have harm and and a content to it. You know, is that a part of my culture, right? Does that define who I am? You know, it's complicated, right? Our being a Black American in this country, and you're talking about culture, it's complicated, because who we are originally and still are is still defined by others and not us, right? And our households, even Christianity, like I believe in God, right? But I don't believe in religion, because that's defined. The culture of religion for me is defined by somebody else. You know, you was a slave, and then Sundays you can worship like and read this Bible that's still gonna continue to justify you being enslaved, right? You know,
because so it's not even I wrote this Bible specifically for the slave people,
specifically for the slave,
removing chapters so that you wouldn't want to run.
So you can understand why you enslaved, right? So I mean, when we look, I mean, like on the surface, yes, it's music, it's arts, and people are mimicking who we are, and they like appropriations, like, you know, like yada yada yada. But internally, deeply, could we even say it's for the culture when we don't even know what the hell the culture is? Because it's still defined by white people for us. You know, when I'm looking, Nike owns hashtag Black Lives Matter. How did that switch? When I look and it's and I like I said, I do a lot of I love music. So, you know, when CEOs that are not of color determine what I can listen to and what I can say, that I mean, how then what is my culture? You can't tell me it's still just fried chicken and watermelon. Because that was also told me what I can and cannot have and what Black culture is, you know, barbecue.
Yeah.
By white people. And I don't listen. This is not about white versus Black, but this is about when we're talking about culture, then how do we get it? If my Hungarian side of my family understands gypsies, right? They understand that the food in a culture is zerba and goulash, right? That's clear. I can trace that back to generations. That culture is deep, it's clear, it's laid out, right? But being a Black person in this country, my culture is defined by whatever white people still tell me that my culture is defined by. So when I say for the culture, am I really saying, oh, this is really for the white man? I don't know.
Pocket.
Right. I'm doing it for the culture. You know, I love when,
even with basketball.
Oh,
even with sports and football.
Yes.
It's still not like more, yeah, sure, we play basketball and football and even baseball, but we'll play football and basketball and that be we're so great at athletics. It's still, I watched like a mini documentary where it was still being compared to slavery and auctioning off Black folks.
Yes, I watched that same thing and I thought to myself, as rich as you has a Michael Jordan and a Magic Johnson, all these individuals, why no one ever thought about a BNA, a BIPOC National Association? Like, you know what I'm saying? Instead of a national, you know, association, you know, an NBA. Like, you know, why no one ever thought about like a Black basketball association? You know, a BBA, like, you know what I'm saying? Or a Black football league, a national Black football, like, you know, or a BIPOC National Football League, you know, something like that. We're no longer just on display.
Yeah, no they turned themselves into free agents because that's as close as it gets. And so I feel like we are I feel like the reason why generations prior to mine really are annoyed by Gen Zers and millennials, something that I consider myself to be both at the same time because I was born in 95. So with that, I just feel like they get mad at us because we are saying, hey, we see that y'all didn't want to take this stuff, but it was still cool for in your day for everybody to laugh at Eddie Murphy's joke when he came out offending homosexuality. He was in that red tracksuit, I think it was.
Raw. What I'm
talking about.
It's called Raw. Yeah.
He came out, and I can't say that Eddie Murphy was as wrong as he was because I listened to the crowd after he said the joke, and the whole theater was on fire laughing.
Yeah.
So it was the society. It was our social acceptance of what he was saying at that time that led him to be comfortable to feel like this was okay. And that's why I can't ever cancel a whole bunch of people that we quote unquote want. What is cancel culture? That's a whole nother conversation. But to your points on for the culture and what is the culture, well, that's why I recognize that my husband and I are completely different. My husband is not an African American man. He is a Black
Right.
man. He is
Right.
not African American. He didn't watch Martin. He he don't know. If I say something like, damn, Gina, he wouldn't know what I'm talking about. If I was
Right.
to say, if I was to say, you ain't gotta lie, Craig, he won't know what I'm talking about.
Right.
If I like he and not to say that my culture is condensed to a whole bunch of movies and hip hop and references of Love Jones and not to say that that's what my culture is condensed to, but if rightfully so, if he was to come to me and talk about some merengue song, I would know unless he told me, a particular reference of what something means. And they have this word tigre, which is a tiger, and it's like the N word. It's aloof. It's an aloof or endearing or casual use of to call or to talk about a Dominican person or Dominican people. Just like the N word, I can use it angry.
Right.
I can use it happy. I can use it to hug you, to reference to this person and that person. Tiguerito, to make it cute, meaning my son. I can really big it up. But it's really interesting because, like you said, even the N word itself was a word given to us by use means of harm. And so when I think of, and we beautified this use of harm. So when I think about like what is African American culture specifically, when I'm saying Black culture, I think survival. And I feel like that's where me and my husband, who is not African American but is a Black person, because the meanings are interchangeable, as to be African American or to be a part of the African diaspora, the dispersal of African people along this whole continent. I feel like our need for survival by any means necessary, unfortunately, you didn't hear my grandma. If I was to ask my grandma born 1919 if she lived through the Depression, she'll say, baby, what was that? I was always poor. She didn't, nobody in my family was jumping off buildings and rooftops. You know what I'm saying? She was already it was already depression. And I think that something that most white folks don't understand is that the reason why we're so attached in community the way that we are because of our color is because that is the common denominator of discrimination, and then the need for the means of us knowing we have to survive. I connect my husband and I's different experiences in Blackness because the first time he was the first day that he became a Black man, the first day he became an American is the day that he became an American. He got called the N-word. He posted himself being in his uniform as an American soldier, as now a citizen, and he got called the N-word. And so my dad, to him, the man that I was talking about, the man that raised me, he said, welcome, brother.
Right. Welcome to America.
Welcome. We completely embrace you. That's what he told him. He said, welcome.
Wow.
He said, you're with us now. You're one of us now.
Wow.
And that joke, because even Blackness, with the way that we joke, Will Smith says it really great in his book, Will. He says that in essence, he talks about how Black people, when we joke, we want a little bit of harsh truth in it. It's gritty. But with white people, it's like funny and it's farts, and it's like at least with children, it's like this. Their humor is completely different, and it's the reason why we'll say that whatever comedian isn't funny because it's kind of gross, to us at least. But to Black people, it's gritty. It's welcome, brother. Ha ha. laughter is our survival. Listening to whatever it is that we're listening to that we can relate to is our survival. It's that head nod. My dad gave him that head nod that you were talking about, and of understanding and of just allowing you to be and exist, because we live in a society that quite literally doesn't really care for our existence and us being. And so I always wonder, how can we fix this problem when I have a little boy now, and who you hear, but I have a little boy, and I wonder how am I supposed to fix what people project on him, or what he accepts, because people are going to project on you whatever, but he is presenting, he is a ambiguous presenting boy. He looks like he's mixed with his blonde hair and, oh my gosh, with his blonde hair, with his green eyes, with his fairer skin, fairer than him and his father's and my skin. He's very ambiguous looking. He looks like he's a little mixed kid. He looks like he could say that he's this or that and people will believe him. He could say a couple of different things, and somebody will believe him, and he still will face racial discrimination. He will be told also to speak English. This is America. Black people will be like, I don't really know if you belong here, or I'm a kind of sort of, because you're going to have colorist privilege, which is not really, it's more like a backhanded compliment, getting colorism privilege. And I'm like, how do I fix this? Because he can't ever think that him going living in the suburbs means that he's anywhere close to being a gangster. But I mean, there are Black kids that identify that, because it happened with me. I have family members who I know, they were like, they're from the streets, and I'm like, you from Hyde Park, boy, what are you talking about? Like, you live where there's tons of palm trees and it's a gated community. Quit. Right. But I wonder, how do I fix this, other than just telling him what Lao Tzu said: watch your thoughts, they become words, and watch your words because they become actions, and watch your actions because they become habits, and watch your habits because they become your character, and your character, you have to watch that because it becomes your destiny, son. And I don't know if that's good enough sometimes. And I know I'm going to learn it. And I know that all I know is the experience of a fairer skinned Black woman, a drug dealer's daughter, the daughter of this and that, the descendant of this person and that person, who are all very Black and proud to be. But I always wonder, how do I navigate with him so that he doesn't take on the things that I used to believe that people would tell me as a dyslexic person, as a queer person. And even now, because I'm in a heteronormative relationship, which for political correctness term, it just means I'm in a relationship where I'm presenting to no longer be a part of the LGBTQ community because I'm with a man and had a baby with him. Or I'm with a cis man who was assigned male at birth, and I had a baby with him as a cis woman. So I just wonder, how am I gonna, with all of these nuances, how do I protect him from this colonized mentality? Because that's what it is. Do you think that, I know you don't have any children, but
no, I don't have any children, but as an auntie, what I typically do is I still try to give them the tools to navigate it, because it's only so much that I can do, that their parents can do, that can shield them from the harsh reality. I think I do the same thing that my parents do, is prepare us, right? Prepare us for the moments that they cannot protect us, right? Giving us those tools to understand that, like, regardless of how we're approached or treated, whether it's loved on or hated on, whether it's embraced or rejected, that that we would still have the tools to not internalize it as a part of who we are, right? That we leave it at the door, either one. You know, if people are giving me accolades, or if they talking against me, it's all the same to me, right? Because neither defines who I am. Only my own internal works, the things that I do, define who I am. So I think that, like, that's the greatest gift that we can give, is the empowerment of self. Because society, this world is very amazing and great because we're alive in it, but it's very cruel and disparaging at moments if we allow it to be, if we allow it to bring us down. And it's a hard task. Like, I always say all the time is, as much as I love kids, I don't know how I will be able to raise a kid in a society that, I don't know how my parents raised me in a society that just discredit and discount who I am once I'm out of the womb, whether that's from the lack of medical attention that's given to people of color, whether that's the lack of access to availability of education, regardless of what neighborhood we live in. If you're blessed and one of the onlys in a neighborhood, in a community, that you can get affordable education, affordable health care, then you're still looked at a certain way. How do you stay grounded? And to me, we begin to teach our kids how to stay grounded by grounding them early on with the tools that they're going to need to plant themselves. I was writing something the other day, and as we close out, I know it makes me think about that. Hold on, I'm sorry, my dog walker is coming. And it made me think about being rooted like a tree, being rooted like a tree, and what are we branching out to do? And so I just I want to close out by saying that, like, we, being rooted like a tree, if we're being rooted like a tree, what are we branching out to do? How are we pouring in? How are we giving those tools? And I think that's the greatest gift that we can give. Just be rooted, stay rooted. Sometimes I wish I was a tree, right? Trees have seen so much, and people are like, well, they weather the storm, but they've been around for everything. They've seen people change. They have seen civilization change. They lived through pandemics and recessions and depressions, but they're still rooted. They're still grounded. And when they get uncomfortable, they grow differently, right? If they know that the light is going to, they start to branch out differently, right? And so I wonder if we can give our kids that same tool, right? And we can give them the tools to be rooted like a tree when weather afflictions come, when people start to say things, when people start to mistreat them, when people begin to do things to make them feel less than, when your baby's so light skinned that they say, hey, you're not black enough. When you're so dark, when they say, why are you that black? So I think the greatest gift that we can give is to stay rooted like a tree, and know what it is that we're branching out to do, and never let anybody shake that, or shape who we become, even in our trials and tribulations and our adversities, to remain resilient, and that's all I have to say.
Ashe. Ashe. It's a wrap. If you like this episode and want to hear more like it, then don't forget to follow the show, Poetry, Prose, and Politics, at The Political Poet everywhere you are social. That's THAPOLITICALPOET. Everywhere you are social. This show is also aired on KTQA-LP 95.3 FM Tacoma, so you can always catch me over there on their airwaves, or you can listen to me wherever you stream your favorite podcast. Until next time, catch you later.